Massacres in Damascus and its countryside, and the regime razed neighborhoods of Aleppo, leaving a trail of destruction in the city. The Syrian government mobilizes its troops to storm Lajat in Dar'a amid heavy shelling on villages and towns in the region. Also in the news, Brahimi says that he will do his utmost to help the Syrians, and Pillay demands an immediate investigation in the Daraya massacre. Welcome to Orient TV English News Bulletin. Regime forces killed dozens of people in Al-Magharba street behind Palestine roundabout in Damascus after a mortar shell fell on houses in the area, while the Palestine camp witnessed raids and arbitrary arrests, especially in Al-Ja'ouna street and Sadaf, where a large number of young people were captured. Moreover, artillery and mortar shelling by tanks was renewed from military barracks towards Al-Qadam and Al-Asali neighborhoods amid violent gun battles between the state troops and the Free Army. In the countryside of Damascus, activists spoke of a massacre committed by the government forces in Zamalka, where residents found 17 unknown dead bodies who were handcuffed, and more than 7 children were also found dead in Ain Mnin mountain, while the city of Mu'addamiyat al-Sham came under artillery shelling from the 4th Division headquarters towards the southern Damascus neighborhoods and western suburbs towns, and the towns of Limleha and Sabina and Basatin al-Hujayra were also exposed to mortar shelling amid violent clashes between the state troops and the Free Army in the Qatana, after the defection of many elements of the regime's army in the area of Al-Barka.
The disaster of brutal destruction and devastation is still present in the capital Damascus and its countryside, as the city of Zabadani woke up as usual on the impact of intensive airstrikes without interruption by Al-Assad regime forces. The regime's tanks, which is stationed particularly in the neighborhood of Al-Qadam and Al-Asali, renewed its shelling on Al-Qa'a area after violent clashes between members of the Free Syrian Army and the regime forces, at a time when the neighborhood of Nahr Aisha witnessed the spread of the regime snipers who were firing indiscriminately on civilians. Siege was also imposed on the neighborhood of Qatana in Damascus amid a large spread of Shabiha forces. In conjunction with storming the neighborhoods of the Fashuk and the Tadamun, the regime continues its aircraft bombardment on residents, which resulted in fires that stretched to large areas. The same scene was repeated on the airport street, where fire smoke covered the sky. And in East Ghouta, a battalion was formed that belongs to the Free Syrian Army. Anger is spread among citizens amid all this consistent bombardment in Damascus neighborhoods, which will not stop until the overthrow of Al-Assad's regime and the achievement of the goals of the revolution.
And to know more about the situation in Damascus, the capital of Syria, we speak to Suzanne Ahmed, an activist from Damascus. Suzanne, good evening to you. Suzanne, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Suzanne, can you tell us more about the situation at the moment in the capital?
Okay. More massacres have been perpetrated today in Damascus and Damascus suburbs. You know, if you are asking about the capital specifically, it looks like an occupied city. But let me first talk about the number of killed people today. We have more than 60 killed people in Damascus and its suburbs. 36 were killed in Tadamun, 17 in Zamalka, 3 in Mu'addamiyya, one of them from Sarouja, 3 in Deir al-Asafir, 2 in Duruma, 2 in Yalda, 1 from Daraya, 1 in Beit Sawa, and 1 from Zabadani, 1 in the Shabiya, 1 Shifoniya, 1 from Hamuria, 1 Qatana, and 1 in Mukalbiya. He was killed 2 days ago in Tadamun. Horrible massacre took place in Tadamun was discovered today, where like More than, I told you, 36 were killed, found dead after being executed. Among them were women and children. Moreover, Assad's forces used bulldozers to destroy residential houses. Yelda, on the other hand, was subject to rocket shelling today. Sabiha stormed Babila and looted and vandalized stores while snipers spread on rooftops. Sounds of explosions and shelling southern parts of Damascus were heard clearly everywhere inside the capital. More than 60 checkpoints spread in the city, and Assad's forces arrested passers-by randomly and humiliated them. Early in the morning, Al-Hajar al-Aswad at Atadamun and even Al-Yarmouk were being shelled heavily. The Free Syrian Army managed to destroy a tank in Atadamun. That's why Assad's forces get mad there. Protesters took to the streets and chanted anti-regime slogans in many neighborhoods in Damascus, like in Kabr Atika, Salhia, and Berzi. As for Zabadani, it's being shelled for the 66th day. It's unbelievable how everything in all neighborhoods are targeted there. There are dozens of wounded people and burnt houses. Very bad humanitarian situation was reported. Telfita in Al-Kalamoun was being shelled for long hours today, and the leader of the 3rd Brigade threatened to raid the area, and people are afraid of perpetrating a massacre there. Helicopters hover extensively and at a low latitude over the Tel Nin, Telfita, and Yabrud.
Suzanne, can you tell us more about the Zabadani? You said it's been targeted for the 66th day. Suzanne, are you still with us on the line? Okay, we seem to have lost Susan Ahmed, an activist from Damascus, and we move on in the bulletin. We move on to Aleppo, where 10 people have been killed today, while activists said dozens were seriously injured by mortar shelling on the city of Darat Azza, and helicopter bombed Al-Hulluk neighborhood with heavy machine guns, and the artillery bombardment was renewed on the neighborhoods of Sheikh Khudr and Bustan al-Qasr. In the meantime, the town of Deir Hafir was bombed by artillery and military aviation, while reports mentioned that 3 were killed and dozens were wounded after the collapse of a mosque at Al-Hawud roundabout in Al-Qadi Askar neighborhood, as the search process under the rebels continued. And we move on to the devastated province of Homs, where the city of Al-Reston came under rocket shelling and heavy machine guns, killing a number of civilians, wounding others, as well as destroying many buildings. While shelling renewed this morning on the besieged neighborhoods by regime forces stationed next to the shoe market. And the city of Talkallah witnessed heavy bombardment that targeted civilian homes, causing significant damage as the regime's forces tried to storm Al-Burj neighborhood amid clashes with the Free Syrian Army. In the city of Tadmur, the state security forces and Shabiha militias carried out a crackdown in central neighborhood near Al-Abbara. And we speak to our regular correspondent, Sami Rifai, an activist from Homs. Sami, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Sami, can you tell us more about the violent attacks that Homs have been undergoing for the past week? It's been intensified recently. Any reason that you have in mind for that?
No, I have no idea. Absolutely no idea. Shelling was intensified in the past three months, actually, not only in the past week. But, so far today we've got 3 martyrs, but in reality this figure is much less than the reality on the ground. But since we cannot reach out to the victims, to the casualties who are buried under the rubble, so we can't really tell how many victims, how many martyrs we have. Now, 13 areas were shelled today. Among them were especially Talkallah, Reston, Al-Qasr, the old Homs district was horribly shelled. We have Talbisi and Bab Amr. Now, in Talkallah, the regime forces shelled it with C-722 tanks from an Al-Ash checkpoint, and many people were wounded, and many houses were destroyed. In Palmyra, as you just said, the regime did something that's even more horrifying than shelling, which is arresting people. They arrested so many people, including three Free Syrian Army soldiers, and we count them dead because we don't know what the regime army is going to do to them. Most likely he's going to execute them. Now the shelling also was focused on Babad Rape, as I just said. Now the reason why not so many people are dying in those areas is that over 70% of the civilians have fled the violence, have fled the shelling. So when a bomb fell, there's usually not many people. But then in the past 3 months or so, the regime is now targeting even those areas where displaced civilians are. So we're expecting more people are going to die.
Sami, would you say that the regime's attacks nowadays have become predictable in certain areas, or are they just randomly targeting areas that people wouldn't expect?
They're using both ways. Sometimes it is targeted. It is, they target areas where where there are, the hideouts that are known to be the hideouts of the Free Syrian Army, like the Western Al-Qusayr. But other times they just revenge attacks. Maybe after the Free Syrian Army does something that's really heroic, destroys many tanks, then the Assad forces come into retaliation and attack civilians. So because they are cowards, they even shelled from pro-regime areas because they know that the Free Syrian Army is not going to attack back for fear of injuring civilians who are with the government nonetheless.
Sami Al-Rifai, an activist from Homs, thank you so much for being with us. And to tell you the latest news that the local coordinating committees have we just received news from them that the death toll has reached 110 in Syria today, mostly in Damascus. We move on to Daraa in southern Syria. 4 people were killed, including a woman and a child, and many more people were wounded after artillery shelling targeted an oven in the town of Naima. While artillery shelling and rocket launchers shook the towns of El-Yadude, Njej, Al-Naima, Nsib, and Al-Lajat, which came under fire from machine guns of helicopters. In the meantime, the town of Enkhil witnessed heavy mortar shelling of the 15th Brigade, while activists reported hearing voices of powerful explosions in cities in As-Sanamin and Da'il.
Allahu Akbar. انتشار شبيهات الشباب سامعيني ولا لا؟ قتل زيلات على الاستراد باتجاه شمال باتجاه الشام باتجاه الحرس الشمالي.
Heavy shelling from tanks and artillery that belonged to the regime army shook the villages of Lihwez, Lihweja, and Al-Hawash in Sahl al-Ghab, while the neighborhood of Sheikh Ambar widespread heavy security deployment in preparation for storming it amid panic among the residents. And the Corniche al-Bayad witnessed raids and arbitrary arrests of dozens of young men. An activist reported heavy shooting from heavy machine guns from Al-Alaf barrier west of the town of Kawkab. Coming up in the bulletin, Nabil Al-Arabi confirmed that Brahimi's mission is to find ways to stop the bloodshed in Syria. Welcome back. You're watching Orient TV English News Bulletin. In Idlib, regime forces have caused the death of 8 people, 4 of them from one family, and many were wounded due to the fall of dozens of shells on the western neighborhood of the city of Ma'arat al-Nu'man. According to the Syrian Revolution General Commission, many were injured during the bombing of all villages surrounding Abu Dhur military airport amid displacement movement among the residents. The artillery bombardment of cities and neighborhoods of Deir ez-Zor were renewed today, killing and wounding many, where the regime's random shelling targeted the field hospital in the city of Al-Muhassan, wounding many as renewed artillery and mortar bombing continued on various neighborhoods of Deir ez-Zor, in particular Al-Hamidiyya, Al-Aradi and Al-Bu Kamal market, which was completely destroyed as a result of heavy shelling. The Syrian community in New York took to the streets in rallies of support for the Syrian revolution, condemning the international community's silence and inaction to stop the bloodshed.
أنني أدرك تمام الإدراك أنها مهمة صعبة جدا، ولكن رأيت
UN and Arab League's new envoy to Syria, Lakhdar al-Ibrahimi, said he will visit Damascus during the week to discuss the Syrian crisis and stressed on the sidelines of a joint press conference with the Secretary General of the Arab League, Nabil al-Arabi, that he would work hard to achieve the interests of the Syrian people.
فأنا أعتقد أنني في خدمة الشعب السوري وحده وأن لا سيد لي.
الجامعة العربية طلبت بدء المرحلة الانتقالية وقدمت نداء إلى الرئيس الأسد لحقن الدماء.
On his part, the Secretary General of the Arab League, Nabil al-Arabi, also highlighted that the Arab League has called on al-Assad to stop the bloodshed in Syria in the midst of the continuing conflict and violence in the country, and stressed in this regards that al-Ibrahimi mission today is to find ways to stop the bloodshed in Syria.
ولا يرغب أن يكون محدد بشيء معين. الهدف هو.
For his part, the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon called for the trial of those who are involved in committing war crimes in Syria, calling on all parties of the Syrian conflict to commit to resolving the crisis in this country diplomatically. And in his opening speech during the 20th session of the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, Ban Ki-moon expressed regret at the lack of follow-up by the United Nations of recommendations of the Human Rights Council on Syria. And for her part, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Navi Pillay, condemned the war crimes and crimes against humanity in Syria and demanded immediate investigation in the Daraya massacre. From Cairo, the new international and Arab representative in Syria, Lakhdar al-Ibrahimi, announced that he will soon travel to Damascus and begin his mission, which he said was difficult. In the meantime, a meeting will be held in Cairo today, which is considered the first meeting of a regional contact group on Syria. More updates in this report.
Lakhdar al-Ibrahimi is in Egypt for a 3-day visit after a long journey in New York to receive his mission as a special representative of the United Nations to Syria. And during a press conference at the headquarters of the League of Arab States in Cairo, Brahimi expressed his emphasis on the service of the Syrian people. As he said, the rule is only the rule of the people, after describing his recent mission to Syria as impossible. And he emphasized on the opening of the United Nations office in the capital, Damascus. After talks with the Secretary General of the Arab League, Nabil al-Arabi, Brahimi announced that he will travel soon to Damascus to begin his mission and meet with officials and a number of civil society organizations and intellectuals. According to him, And from his side, the Secretary General of the Arab League, Nabil Arabi, confirmed that the task of Brahimi doesn't have a definite duration and it will continue until achieving the desired goals, pointing out that Brahimi does not wish to disclose his steps at the moment to resolve the crisis until he completes his contacts with all parties inside and outside Syria. And in the meantime, Cairo hosts today the first meeting of the Regional Contact Group on Syria. The group includes, along with Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Iran, which is expected to invest its opportunity to present its vision and call for the involvement of other countries to join the group, including Iraq. The daily war crimes in Syria prompted the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to threaten to prosecute those involved in war crimes in the country. He said this at the Human Rights Council at the United Nations during the opening 21st session of the Human Rights Council in Geneva, which will last for 3 weeks. And Ban condemned the choice of force instead of dialogue by the two parties, and he called on both parties to support the efforts of the UN Special Representative, Lakhdar Brahimi. In her turn, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Navi Pillay, demanded an immediate investigation on the Raya massacre last month that killed hundreds of civilians. Pillay called on the Syrian government to ensure full access and unconditional independent UN Commission of Inquiry. International moves from Cairo to Damascus wave solutions through statements. But the Syrians did not see anything yet, especially that the bombing and the massacres are constant. The convictions and the vows of the High Commissioner for Human Rights or other humanitarian organizations and political conferences are no longer enough for the Syrian people.
And before we wrap up, here's another look at today's top stories. Massacres in Damascus and its countryside increased the death toll to 110, and the regime raids the neighborhoods of Aleppo, leaving a trail of destruction in the city. The Syrian government mobilizes its troops to storm Lajat and Daraa amid heavy shelling on villages and towns in the region.
أعتقد أنني في خدمة الشعب السوري وحده.
And Brahimi says he will do his utmost to help the Syrians, and Pillay demands an immediate investigation in the Daraa massacre. With this, we end our news bulletin from Orient TV. Thank you for watching.